Yo, what's going on, Comfy Gang? It's your boy, Comfy NEET. So today's topic has been something that's been on my mind for a while. And where it really started from, I guess, with this idea in my head was when I was talking to one of my cousins about, my social anxiety and just kind of like confessing to her about what I was going through. And, I guess explaining my side, not my side, but like what exactly it's like to have social anxiety. And then one thing she said kind of struck me, and she said, oh, so basically for you, it's like high school never ended. And I really thought about that for a while. And, I guess it kind of makes sense because for, I guess, a lot of normies, high school ends and you get to be this new person in college. But, and while I do sort of agree with this, which is why I'm not going to say high school never ended definitively, but I will make the argument that high school never truly ends because I feel that there are certain, social phenomena, and, different forces, different things at play that kind of persist all the way from high school until the end of your life, basically, maybe less so as you enter irrelevancy as a 60 or 70-year-old, but for the most part these things kind of persist. And in a way I'm making the argument that high school is essentially a sort of microcosm of society, and that basically it's not a reflection, like a foreshadowing of what you will be going through for the rest of your life, albeit with a few exceptions. Like, for example, I'll get into that later in the video. So anyways, yeah. In my opinion, the reason high school never ends is because essentially in high school, I guess even middle school, like especially after you go through puberty and you start to develop and mature as a person, you start to enter the whole social world and have to start dealing with the reality of social hierarchies and hierarchies everywhere. These hierarchies kind of exist even when you're like a toddler or like before you hit middle school, but they're not really that important at the time. There's no like popularity contests among fifth graders. There's no like who can be the cool kid, except maybe in your own class where you're trying to compare who has the coolest toy or who has the best Pokemon or whatever. And whatever. But anyways, once you you cross that threshold of maturity and start to experience the social world as it is, you start to have things like the cool kids versus the non-cool kids, bullies and non-bullies, and all these things. And and what's interesting is that I feel like there are certain things that determine whether you are bullied or not. For example, obviously one key factor would be genetics, and specifically your physical characteristics, which are partially a product of your environment, but also especially at that age where you're still developing and you still haven't your body still hasn't been subjected to like the growth of puberty and all that stuff about your face developing normally with like proper tongue posture and everything hasn't come into play yet. There are really certain key aspects that parts of your physical appearance that will largely determine whether you're bullied. And it'll be things like your facial symmetry, whether your eyes are tilted positively or negatively, canthal tilt. And also, obviously one key thing is like height, right? Like and height and size and like weight, for that age. Because obviously everybody grows up. I mean, will grow up at different speeds, and some people will be a little bit behind as far as like their growth is, but they'll catch up or even be like bigger than everybody else later on in life. That was kind of like me, to be honest. But I'm not huge, but I'm bigger than a lot of people that I went to school with. But I remember as a kid, I was I was fairly skinny fat. No, I was fat and I was short. Skinny, fat, and short. And yeah, that's certainly a huge factor where, things like height and size will determine whether you're bullied. And, obviously that will persist all the way into your adulthood where, things like your physical appearance will have a huge impact on how you are treated by other people. I mean, obviously, high school does end in the sense that, there are ways to overcome this deficit. Like, for example, let's say if you're short, but you make a lot of money, you are confident, and, you have a good personality, then that can compensate for that to a decent degree. It's not gonna compensate for it completely. Like, for example, if you are in a room with someone who has the exact same traits as you, except they're taller than you, and maybe they look better, then people are naturally going to respect the person who is exactly the same as you in all of the ways except your looks more than you, because you're lacking in that deficit. And I guess even to an extent, confidence does play a role in whether you're bullied or not as a kid when you're short and small and weak. But I'd say it's to a much lesser degree, especially at that age where you are not exactly cognizant of these things. You're just sort of like going with the flow, if that makes sense. And but yeah, these things certainly persist, and yeah, it can have a huge impact. And at the same time, on the subject of bullying, I feel that yeah, bullying still does go on. It's just that when you reach adulthood, it's just a lot less. It's a lot less on the surface. It's a way more covert. It's way more, I don't know. It's way more hidden. But it definitely does exist. Like, for example, in high school or middle school, people who are bullied there might be just, pushed around, shoved into lockers, punched, kicked, or, made fun of behind their back, have people, whispering and making jokes at their expense and things like that. And interesting, while a lot of the more severe stuff, goes away, I feel like that's replaced by a lot of the more social ways of bullying. So, for example, a lot more gossiping will happen, a lot more crap talking, and occasionally still, physical violence. It's just that doesn't happen as much because it's, illegal and socially frowned upon for good reason. But I feel like if those sort of social norms weren't in place, then I feel like it would happen just as much as it did at that age. But thankfully, that's not the case. And yeah, as far as things like status goes and hierarchies, social hierarchies, I feel like that also persists past high school. So for instance, let's say, yeah. So basically I'm saying that the world is essentially one giant popularity contest. And I'm not saying it's like this with all people or in all cultures or in all communities, but I feel like it is like that predominantly in a lot of different societies and cultures around the world. I think it is part of some innate aspect of us that needs to, gauge ourselves against other people and compete. And yeah, that's certainly that certainly persists all the way through, where you know, you're basically sizing each other up and you're competing for resources and all these things and attention and the right to me and all these things, and that will largely persist. And obviously at the same time, I feel like to what extent these popularity contests exist are also dependent on the societies in which you're located in. So, and that applies to both during high school and after high school, where, for example, if you're in a more kind society, if that even exists, I feel like they do though, like maybe in some parts in like Northern Europe or something, everybody there seems way nicer, but I don't know anything about these areas, but let's just say they are. I imagine, it's probably a lot better there in high school too, versus somewhere like, or even like Canada, at least from what I've seen, isn't as bad as somewhere like America or, I don't know where else, but maybe it's just like a meme in all the movies portraying America as this like this savage hellscape for teenagers where, the big like jocks just, take a shit on everyone who's smaller than them. But yeah, I feel like as far as America goes, that certainly persists all the way until, you become an old person. And yeah, and as far as, and I guess how it does change after high school is that, things like wealth and, again, status start to come more into play. But if you kind of look at it like the sort of like underlying like whatever structure of things, it's still a huge popularity contest where you're instead of flexing, instead of just relying purely on like your looks and your size and I guess what you're good at, like sports or things like that, you instead start to compete in terms of like how much money you have, your net worth, the value of the things that you use to cope with, and all these things, and you're essentially competing for the exact same things that I mentioned before, just with different, I guess, ways of competing. And another way it doesn't, I guess, high school never truly ends, is that let me think. So I guess the last reason high school doesn't end has less to do with, forces on the outside, but it has more to do with you as an individual. So I guess there is the chance that, maybe once you went to high school and, let's say you weren't popular, you were basically a nobody, or you were picked on, there's a chance that you'll happen to fall into a different social circle in high school. I mean, in university or college or outside of high school, and you'll find your place in the world. You'll meet these great people who will be your friends and bring you up. But I feel like all these portrayals of that happening in like Hollywood are really just essentially marketing for university. And I feel like for most people, you are largely going to be the exact same person you were in high school. You will change, obviously. I've changed since high school, but in terms of my social abilities, my social anxiety, all these things about me, my work ethic, how I dressed, how I looked, and all these things, I've largely remained the same, and I feel like it's like that for most people. So let's say you are predisposed to being a NEET because of all the things I just previously mentioned, and you've been bullied and you've had all that happen. Well, the chances of you getting out of that seem to be fairly thin, and it definitely takes way more effort on the individuals who go through these things or are predisposed to, NEETdom than, let's say someone who's predisposed to be a normie. I'm not saying it's not possible to change, but you will largely be the exact same person. Your hobbies, everything will be very similar. So anyways, these are several of the reasons, in my opinion, why high school never truly ends. If you agree with what I've said, or you like this video, or you like my haircut, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button down below. And this is Company signing out.